Okay, you know the IDEA and FAPE trumped the pandemic. Does anyone know if the ADA, the American Disabilities Act, trumps the pandemic or if the pandemic trumps the ADA? All right. Now, first of all, when you say that IDEA and FAPE trumped the pandemic, what you're saying is that the Congress passed on providing any waivers to the individual states when it comes to providing a free, appropriate public education. Okay? That's what that would mean, is that, IDEA and FAPE trump the pandemic because Congress didn't do anything about it. Now, quick little civics lessons, guys. The IDEA was something that was created by Congress. It was an acknowledgement of the rights of students with disabilities, and then additional funding was provided in order to provide the offset of costs that might be necessary for a school to be able to provide what that child is entitled to with regards to free, appropriate public education. But at the same time, Congress, because it was a set of acknowledgments or rights by Congress in a sense, has the power to destroy the IDEA and to stop funding it, to create waivers and really upend it. And people could sit there and say, oh my God, are you serious? Yes, I'm serious because Congress created it, therefore Congress can destroy it. But at the same time, there's a difference between an acknowledgement of your individual rights and your individual liberties as it's designated, denoted, and explained in our Constitution and our Bill of Rights. Okay, you got to start there. Once again, with individuality. That individuality at that point, nothing can destroy that. Congress can't destroy your individualism, your individual rights. Those are yours by natural right. Those are yours by birth. All right. Now, with regards to these congressional type of bills to where we acknowledge a collective identity, like, for example, ergo special education, disability, those kind of rights, yes. But at the same time, even if Congress did away with those things, they cannot destroy your natural rights as an individual human. They cannot do that. Okay? Now, a lot of people have this convoluted idea that somehow we need to move into this collective mindset. And I'm just warning you, no, collective can be destroyed because of government. Government does those things all the time. What it cannot destroy is your individuality, your uniqueness, your rights as a human being, your natural rights as a human being. And so you got to start from that framework first and foremost, and then work from there. So with regards to the IDEA, yes, Congress did not opt to waive, and neither did the Trump administration at the time back in May. Who knows what the Biden administration will do? It's a new administration. But as of right now, those decisions were made back in May, and the Trump administration and Congress did not provide any waivers. So let's talk about the Americans with Disabilities Act. Guys, during a crisis, your rights will always fall victim. All right, your rights will always be a casualty to a crisis. Now, does that mean it's legal? Does that mean it's right? Absolutely not. Doesn't mean it's right. It doesn't mean it's not happening. It doesn't mean that your government doesn't screw up, and your neighbors and businesses and all these other people that decide to buy into the fear that sit there and destroy other people's rights because they're in the midst of a crisis and they somehow feel justified and all filled with their own self-righteousness that they can sit there and say, well, for the collective, we've got to protect the collective, we've got to protect the community from this perceived crisis. Whatever it is, guys, you sit there and you think the pandemic's some unique situation. Guys, this country has been through crisis after crisis after crisis after crisis. And every time the mob, the emotional fear takes over with a segment of the population and somebody gets hurt. A group, individuals get hurt because of the fear and the perception of justification from, it can be a majority, doesn't matter. And guys, the majority is wrong frequently. So, you know, I've said this time and time again. I am a civil rights attorney, first and foremost, who happens to specialize in special education law. But as a civil rights attorney, I find it absolutely inane to sit there and go with the status quo and go with the majority. That's a bad way to live a life, because the majority is frequently wrong, and so is the status quo. My job is to protect the minority position, not minority, okay? Because a minority position could be anything. It could be an ethnicity, it could be a race, it could be a religion, it could be a belief, it could be a disability, it could be a special need. I don't care what it is. A minority position is anything that exists around a majority group. So let's say you're in the Papa Bear Club, okay? And they vote on, you know, whatever the provisions are for Papa Bear Club, and they wear stupid little hats, all right? Within the Papa Bear Club, there's going to be a minority position. There's going to be people that don't agree with whatever the majority are voting for. And sometimes that works out, because that's just how society works when you want to be civil and not kill each other, all right? So there's going to be those who by majority rule, things are fine. But at the same time, if the Papa Bear Club was voting to remove the membership of these people that don't agree with, let's say, the president or some of the other council members, then at that point, you see, now it's a violation, because it's the majority that are making determinations against a minority position. And like I said, I don't care what that minority position is. They don't need to be trampled on. And then you take that minority position and you deconstruct it one more level. Now you have individual rights and you have individuality. And that individuality is then what composes all of those different identities and those things that make you unique and awesome. And yes, all of those different identities can intersect, which creates intersectionality. But at the same time, you deduce it down to the individual, not the collective. All right, so the simple answer is that your rights suffer during a pandemic, during any kind of crisis, during war. I don't care what it is. It doesn't mean they're right. And no, the ADA trumps the pandemic. The ADA absolutely trumps the pandemic. Now you sit there and somebody could come at me and go, well, James, well, what about, you know, these businesses? These businesses are wrong. And you're going to find out that they're all going to be reversing their policies with regards to denying people entrance because they're not wearing a mask. You're starting to see that now, because see, now the fear is starting to wane. Now we're starting to get back to normal. And now as that comes back down, there's less and less people that are falling for the fear, that are falling for the crisis, and that are now using their reason to sit there and go, well, maybe this wasn't smart policy across the board. Also, we're finding that masks have had a negligible impact from the states that mandated it, from the states that didn't. So, you know, with regards to businesses that are sitting there denying people entry, or schools that are denying children participation strictly because of not wearing masks, and then them not adhering to the very clear exceptions that have existed in every one that I've seen, every state governor's mask mandate. There has to be that exception in there. Even the state of New Mexico, with that crazy governor who loves draconian rules, had exceptions within the mandate to cover the ADA. Now, whether or not people were following that is a completely different question and a completely different answer. They should have been following it. And you sit there and you go, well, I asserted it and I got kicked off of an airplane. Yes, that's called a violation. And yes, that would result in a lawsuit. And then potentially that will result in an airline having to pay somebody some damages because of what they did across other areas. You just don't get to arbitrarily, make these kind of determinations and violate people's rights. It doesn't mean that they don't, though. And that's what I want you guys to really take away from this. During a crisis, people do the craziest things and law goes out the window. It doesn't still make them right. It doesn't make them right for violating your individual rights. And so if you have a clear, not even a clear, I mean, my God, you don't even need a clear, because nobody's technically supposed to question you with regards to the nature of your disability. Hell, it could be psychological. It could be physiological. And you could assert that as an exception to these rules. And nobody's supposed to question you about that. But the ADA absolutely trumps a pandemic, trumps a war, it trumps any kind of crisis. Now, it doesn't mean that in the throngs of that crisis that people aren't violating that. Doesn't mean that they have any right to, because once again, your natural rights as a human being should be respected first and foremost. And that's nothing that government can give anybody. You have to remember that first and foremost, that your individual rights are wrapped up by birth in you as a human being existing. It's not something that Congress confers upon you. And it's not something that a business can just arbitrarily recognize if they want to. That's from your civil rights attorney, if you choose to listen to me or not. And some of you are full on into this collective mindset that we should all just sacrifice together. And I do not ascribe to that. I think it's a dangerous ideology and one that we've spent 20th century trying to defeat. And I will not go back. I will not look backwards. And I will look forward, and I will continue to keep a single mind forward on your individual rights, whether I agree with you or disagree with you. I think that you have a right to exist and have, and I don't think that it's any of my business as long as it's not hurting other people in a substantive way. And people go, well, masks. No, what we did was we declared everybody a carrier when it just wasn't legitimate. It's just not legitimate to sit there and declare everybody a potential viral carrier, patient zero. That was part of that emotional crisis, the mob mentality, the fear speaking. There was no rationality behind it. None. Natural rights, your rights, always trump the state. It just may take a while for the state to recognize that they were wrong, which always happens. I mean, it's happening now. Court cases now are starting to come out and knock down these governors for their hardcore policies. And they're going to start knocking these businesses down. And if you haven't noticed on the television, they're not making commercials with masks anymore. And they're starting to back off of all of that stuff. It's all very subtle, but pay attention, because that's a signal. It should be a signal to everybody what direction that we're all going. And they're going to try to back out of this without carrying the legal consequences for trampling on people's rights for the last year.